Good evening, good evening, good evening. Who slaps you on the ass condescendingly, but then buys you a drink and tells you your hair is nice? Not us two. We're gentlemen. It's that's other people, and we also have no hair, so we don't like to talk about. It's the American Scouser TV Thursday night podcast. ASTV for the cool kids. There's just two of us this week. It's me and Brian. Brian, how are you?
Doing fantastic.
And we are at a later time this week because mortgages need to be paid. And work needs to be done. And then I had to eat a pretzel from Subway. They're remarkably good. The pretzels from Subway are remarkabably good for a Subway pretzel. And I love me some pretzels. But there's not much soccer Liverpool-wise to talk about. Arnie Slot has given his interview, but we're kind of essentially waiting for the transfer market to open for anything real to happen. Euros are on a 2-day break, so we can't even talk about those. And America, I believe, just lost to Bolivia. No.
That to Panama.
Panama, that's right. 2-1.
Terrible keeping. Keeping.
All right, I'll have to see it later on, but by the looks of the stats, well-deserved loss with 24% possession or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about something different tonight. We're going to talk about Liverpool, but Liverpool in the past, and what we are going to talk about and what we would like to hear from you guys on the comments is 3 Liverpool players that you wish the Liverpool team of their era had signed, and then 1 Liverpool player you wish had never darkened the doors of Anfield ever. And I'm going to start with my one because not just because he's Irish, but because I think it would have elevated the team he would have played in. Alan's joined us tonight. Good evening, Alan. This player would have elevated the team that he would have played in immensely and could have turned us into title contenders, and that player is Roy Keane, who was at Nottingham Forest, so an incredibly attainable player. That's the only rule for this game, is the player had to be somebody we could buy. So prime era Messi at Barcelona is not going to Liverpool at any stage of the game. That's just way off target. But for me, Roy Keane in the 90s, had he joined Graham Souness's Liverpool, and then had nice earrings, Brian. Joined Liverpool in the 90s, I think under Graham Souness it would have been to start. And then in that Roy Evans 3-5-2 team where we were crying out for a leader and crying out for a midfield battler, I think he would have changed that team around. We had Michael Owen coming through the ranks. We had Steve McManaman. We had an ailing John Barnes, but still one of the best passers of a ball in English football. Neil Ruddock would have had somebody that would punch him in the face when he got out of hand. Which was needed. We had Mark Wright, John Scales. We had Rob Jones, Stig Bjarnaby at wing back, and we would have had Ian Rush and Robbie Fowler up front. All we needed, as far as I was always concerned, was that midfield general. Roy Keane, who I think, as much as Eric Cantona was the catalyst for Manchester United becoming the powerful force they were, but he would have been a player in the mould of Graham Souness. He would have loved him. Liverpool fans would have loved him. And instead of complaining about him for 30-odd years, we would have said he may have been a pain in the ass, but he was our pain in the ass. Brian, what say you?
Okay, so I'm going to go into the same exact era that you're talking about. I'm going to go with Teddy Sheringham. I think that we were in the market for Teddy Sheringham, but Roy Evans was shut down right there because of the age transfer embargo, kind of like a limit that we had. Teddy Sheringham was 28 then, and I think the club basically said, "Hey, we're not signing players older than that old." And wound up being Teddy Sheringham, played till he was 38. He came there and boosted Manchester United to another level. And I think that with our club right there, I think that he would have came through and gave a little bit of maturity up front to Robbie Fowler, to a rising Michael Owen. I mean, actually, Michael Owen was still pretty young at that point, probably still playing in the youth with the youth. But to Robbie Fowler, he would have been somebody right there that he could have leaned on for a little bit more judgment call. And I think that side would have came through, even with Barnes kind of in this down cycle, rush toward his down cycle at the same time right there. That I think that it would have. I think that Sheringham would have came there, probably pushed us to a different level, and you probably wouldn't have gone to the point of having Jed there, because I think that we would have came there and actually got won some titles besides just going out in a nice, pretty white suits at Wembley.
Well, see, that's the thing I like about Roy Keane, is that had we had Roy Keane, white suits would not have been an issue. There wouldn't even been a conversation. It would have been Very quick. Hey, guys, we should wear white. Boom, punch in the mouth. Now, Jamie Redknapp, that's not happening. No, Jamie Redknapp's son, that's not happening, boy. But Eddie Sheringham is an interesting one because Stan Collymore, who was Pellet's partner, was a good player, but as with so many Liverpool forwards, including the one we have now, that we're hoping on the Thursday night show will produce more consistency. Stan Collymore was inconsistent and constantly injured, whereas Eddie Sheringham, who didn't look after his body in the slightest, managed to play through his tour. Yay, as they say. Alan says Sheringham was brilliant and led the line. He wished we could work with Nunes. I think he's about 50-something now, though, Alan. That barely would work.
He probably would still score more than Nunez right now.
Still score more than Nunez. But Teddy Sheringham was an interesting because that Liverpool team, as much as it may have lacked a midfield spine, a backbone, if you will, we also did draw a lot of games because when Robbie Fowler wasn't on form, we didn't have somebody to pick up the slack because Steve McManaman was mercurial. He could turn it on or he could turn it off, and he wasn't really a striker. He was more of a free-floating winger. And Ian Rush was on the way down. He was still good for a few goals now and again, but his pace had deserted him, and we had stopped crossing the ball, so his 9-foot-long neck didn't help anymore. So Teddy Sheringham was an interesting choice. Let's play fantasy football here. How good would that mid-1990s team have been if it had Roy Keane in midfield, Robbie Fowler up front, and Teddy Sheringham, and maybe not Ruddock at the back?
Oh, I mean, I think it'd be a very, very solid side because who were we facing at the same time that was in the ascendancy right there? That was about.
It was Blackburn and United were the two that we had to, and then Newcastle.
Yeah, it was in Blackburn. I mean, of course, you had a Blackburn that eventually came there and had that won the league one of those years right there with it. Correct, right there.
94, 95.
Yeah, so I mean, just with one of the probably top scorers of the whole league with Alan Shearer in there before he made that move to Newcastle. I mean, it would have been pretty competitive. Also, with Sheringham not going to United, I think that you would have probably seen a different Andy Cole that would have came through there because with that thing. Because Dwight York was a transfer that came in from Villa, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, Andy Cole came through there. So I mean, I think you would have had a different type of front line. You might not have had that same type of scoring. In fact, I mean, probably could say that the 99ers right there when they won that probably might not have even happened right there because I don't think you would have had that kind of judgment and that kind of leadership that brought that side of it to where they were. Same thing goes with Roy Keane. I don't think. I mean, same thing. I mean, you lost a big portion of your midfield and one of those people who actually came in to raise the strikers up to another level. So I think that United probably wouldn't have been that side that they were at that point.
I think you're right. I think in the fantasy team with Roy Keane in Liverpool's midfield and Teddy Sheringham up front, it's a three-way horse race. Then maybe a slight four-way race with Newcastle, Blackburn, Liverpool, United. Chelsea threatened now and again under Hull and then Vialli. And Arsenal were Arsenal. They were 2 years. That was 98 when Wenger went to Arsenal. So they were a good few years before the Wenger revolution. But it would have been interesting, I think, with that kind of a team. And then let's say, because Roy Evans was really obsessed with that three at the back, it would have been Bab, Scales, and Mark Wright as the three defenders, three cultured ball-playing defenders. Redknapp, Roy Keane, and John Barnes in midfield.
I don't think Redknapp would have made it. I don't think Redknapp would have made that midfield.
I mean, maybe he wouldn't have. Yeah, you might be right. But we would have had Bjarnaby and Jones as the wing backs, and then Sheringham and Fowler up front. I mean, that's a solid side, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because what was our transfer that we brought? Was it 97 that we brought Pat Berger in? I think it was 97, 98. I think we brought him in.
That was 98, 99, I think.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so you would have had him toward the end of that point right there. I mean, that's a pretty solid team right there. I mean, with that, I mean, then you also had a couple of young kids there. I mean,
yeah, we had Gerrard still to come through and Carragher and Michael Owen, so you would have even had a pipeline
Yeah.
Maybe they wouldn't have been forced into playing in the first team, and we wouldn't have had Houllier at that point then as well. So it would have been a sliding doors moment. So maybe Gerrard doesn't become the midfielder we thought he was going to, because he doesn't get like Houllier took a shine to him and said, "You're my midfielder.
Yeah,
you were only a kid last year, but now you're my main man." So maybe that doesn't happen, but at least that pipeline is there with that side.
I mean, you possibly could have had Gerrard come there playing for United at that point, because Alex Ferguson was taking a fancy to him about that same point. So I mean,
that's true.
Whole many different things could have happened right there. If those that would have happened.
It's the sliding doors moment that we experience every Thursday night with Darwin Núñez the day before, or the weekend before. But Roy Keane and Teddy Sheringham for the Roy Evans era. So my next one then is for the Gerard Houllier era, and it shouldn't be a controversial one, but it was by all accounts genuinely on the table. And Phil Thompson decided against it. But Cristiano Ronaldo was on the radar for Liverpool. I don't think there's 3 managers on the planet who could have got the best out of Cristiano Ronaldo as a 16, 17-year-old. And he went to one of them, which is Alex Ferguson. But Arsene Wenger and Gerard Houllier are the other two, as far as I'm concerned. Coaches who valued youth and knew how to bring it through without getting it. Like, there's so many young players who came through, like Joe Cole at West Ham, who were allowed to have bad lifestyles, who are young players that had talent and potential and didn't fulfill it because they were allowed to develop bad habits. But Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, Gerard Houllier were very, very big on bringing youth through and getting them to live the right way. So Steve McManaman leaves Liverpool for Real Madrid, and we get Cristiano Ronaldo not that long after. I mean, how different is that Houllier team with Cristiano Ronaldo?
So incredibly different, and that was exactly my pick. Also, I had was Ronaldo for my other pick on there, because in the same era with that. I mean, who would have thought a guy who was 4.5 million and sitting there playing in Portugal turned into what he turned into? I mean, it's just amazing to think about right there. I mean, of what he could have done to our side. I mean, with that. I mean, with McManaman leaving, Ronaldo coming up front. I mean, you think about who. I just think about who would have been left out of that side at that point too. I mean, Pratchett Berger would have been gone right there. I mean, then you had Stig Borneby right there at the same time. Pio would have been.
This would have been the Houllier side, so it would have been Jan Arne Riise on the left.
That's right. It was Jan Arne Riise right there. But yes, I mean, it would have been a big change. It would have been a big change. I think that it would have again affected United right there, because I think that the amount of advertising that he brought United and the amount of money that he brought in basically built their side. I mean, it built their side to what they were at that point when he made that transfer across. I mean, because and also his name was there. I mean, everybody knew who Ronaldo was.
I mean, there was also the other Ronaldo that everybody hoped he would be. But let me ask you this question to digress for a little bit. And by the way, on the money thing, we wouldn't have earned as much because we were so bad at business in those days that we probably would have sold more David James, like mass-produced more David James hats than did anything with Cristiano Ronaldo. But here's the digression question, and we'll stick, because we both picked him. Where does Cristiano Ronaldo stand for you in the greatest players of all time argument?
I don't know. There's so many different things you could think of right there. I mean, as far as what a player should be, I mean, I think that his athletic ability, he's pretty high up there, just for his fitness level and a type of player. He's a modern footballer as far as fitness goes, right there. I mean, where you think about the players from the past right there that didn't achieve that level right there. I mean, Ronaldo right there, the original Ronaldo was kind of a little bit more had like issues as far as like weight wise and different things. Ronaldo has worked his ass off in the fitness, and I mean, it became what he is. That's why he's still playing at the point he is now, even though he's playing in the Saudi league. But I mean, I guess you go to this whole Messi versus Ronaldo debate right there through there. I mean, of who's the better one. It goes the same thing at my work right there, where they talk about who's the greatest basketball player there is. I mean, because you have to go think about different eras. Would Ronaldo been as more effective in the '70s than he was in the '90s, going into the 2000s and progressing further when the laws of the game were a little bit rougher? I mean, there was a big difference with how the game was played. I mean, finesse players right there would not make it in that during that time period. So again, in this era, yes, I think that Ronaldo is probably in the top 1 to 2, probably the top 1 or 2 players right there. If you want to make a comparison of all time, I can't right there put him as greatest of all time. I'm probably gonna say, in my opinion, I think one of probably greatest of all time is probably gonna be Franz Beckenbauer. I think that Franz Beckenbauer was like the ultimate footballer before the ultimate footballer ever existed. I mean, with his with the muscle, the strength, and everything that he had. So I mean, but again, it's a hard question to ask right there, because it's based off of what a person's perception of what is the greatest footballer is.
I mean, on the Ronaldo thing, like if you moved pretty much any player of this year, but let's just say Ronaldo or Messi for that matter, in a time machine back to the 70s, nobody would be, or the 80s even, nobody would be talking about Pele or Maradona with their fitness levels of today, because they would literally be the fastest, most enduring players in football at that point, if we could magic them into the past. Because if you look at the old like 60s, 70s, and mid 80s football, there was not an awful lot of pressure. It was kind of a leisurely jog back to your goal to protect it, almost like basketball.
Yeah.
Kind of, you go back and you defend your basket, and you rush forward, you attack, and then you go back. Except there wasn't an awful lot of rushing. So if you were Cristiano Ronaldo, parachuted by quantum leap into the 1974 World Cup finals, you're going to be literally the best thing that's ever happened to soccer. For me, though, I'd still put Pele as number one, simply for what he did for the game. Like, I mean, he was a great player. He was a fantastic player, great goal scorer, and a good creator. People forget that because we didn't have stats for assists. But if you look at Brazil in the World Cups that he played in, he was a very good key pass maker, as they would say these days. However, I would rate Cruyff higher than Beckenbauer.
Oh yeah,
because of his play. His play was fantastic. I think they were equal in terms of what they brought, the change they brought to the game, the perception of what a player is supposed to do. But for me, everything that's happened since Cruyff retired, in terms of how Pep Guardiola plays the game or Brendan Rodgers, comes from him. And if it wasn't for him, even Van Gaal would say he got all his ideas from Johan Cruyff. So for me, in terms of changing the overall way people look at the game and the intelligence he brought to it, I think he did a bit more than Beckenbauer, and without getting put in jail or threatened with jail for fraud. For me, Platini, Cruyff is probably a bit higher than Beckenbauer. But my top 5 would be Pele, Maradona, because he did it all by himself, he was Argentina. I know they had good players, but he was the main guy for Argentina and for Napoli. Like what he did at Napoli was phenomenal. And then Barcelona, and then Messi, Ronaldo, and Cruyff for me are my top 5. What would your top 5 be? And anybody else? Well, we've already got Alan's comments here. We'd love to hear some more people's rankings of that drug addict Maradona, of your top 5s as well, because that's an interesting conversation before we can get back to Liverpool.
I mean, it's in no particular order right there. I think Messi, definitely. I think Maradona, definitely. Beckenbauer. I have to say Ronaldo also, and I have to go probably with Cruyff. I mean, so it's pretty much almost kind of like on par with you. I think that there's you have some scattering of different players that mixed in there that are almost at that level.
So you have who did you miss out from my list? If you have Beckenbauer, do you have Beckenbauer there?
I do have Beckenbauer. Yes.
So who's missing? Is it Messi or Pele?
It was Messi was missing. I don't know. No, I had Messi. No, I had Messi in there. I had Messi. I had Messi, Pele, Ronaldo, Cruyff, and Beckenbauer.
So you don't have Maradona?
I don't have Maradona.
Ooh, how come?
So my issues with Maradona right there is probably the
Apart
same
from the fact
issues
that he's a drug addict.
well, I think that I think that one. I don't think that the World Cup win would have been a win right there if it was actually looked, because I think that it was definitely a handball. What he did.
Whatever do you mean, Brian?
Yeah,
perfectly good header.
What he did at Napoli right there, I can say right there, he did. Was phenomenal right there. He brought them up. There's still a statue there. When I went to their stadium right there when I was in the Navy and saw it, I was like, oh, this is fantastic, and to see this. But I think that you have to go overall the tarnishment of his career, personal wise, and different things like that. I can say even thing to point right there, quote players even close, like even Ronaldinho right there, who was close to that level. His career got tarnished by different things off the pitch and different things that happened through there. You would have been like that what if, kind of like George Best. Same thing. It's that what if thing right there. Is okay. This guy could have been this, and what happened?
Where would you put Michel Platini? Because I nearly mentioned him earlier on, because I liked Platini as a player. But he's also tarnished now as well.
Correct.
But as a player, where would you place him? Because I always thought he was a top 10 player. But
oh yeah.
But as we get on, like in the decades and into the next century and all that, you kind of get those kind of players always get pushed out, don't they?
They do, because one. I think that again, it goes back to the way they changed the game. Of how it was. Like you said earlier, right there, it was a more slower paced game. It was a more technical. It was a more technically thought process. Process back there, right there. The pitch was slower, boggled down, leather ball, like Alan had talked about earlier in the comments, and so it's different now with the way that the uniforms are, the physios you have. Everything that you have right now. I think that the players are just going to go. They're going to ascend all these older players, and plus we're the people that remember those older players. These kids out here don't know who those people are anymore. Right there. Sadly, right there, they go down the history book, the football and history books don't get looked at. Much right there, except for those like you guys talked about with the FA Cup right there, where you back and when you had all the memory games of the FA Cup right there on the FA Cup final Sunday, and you see all the thing right there. They don't have that anymore right there. So these kids aren't seeing who these players used to be. You could probably even go talk to some of our own fan base younger. They wouldn't know who Kenny Dalglish is. They probably wouldn't even know what exactly he did for the club, or what little was this club. Those players right there, they don't. It's the history of the club right there, of all clubs, gets buried in time.
Let's keep on this topic before we go back to Liverpool. Your top 2 goalkeepers of all time, because they get missed out in these conversations.
Oh man, be the Uruguayan goalkeeper right there from the first. I can't remember what his name is. Who won? Shit.
I don't think that was his name.
No, it's not his name. I can't remember what his name is right there. He was the Uruguayan goalkeeper right there, and then another one right there would be the what was the Czech Republic, the Czechoslovakia goalkeeper. It's hard to I can't remember their names right there. Those are ones that I could think of off my hands, but they were back one was back with Uruguay when they were in the 30s when they actually won.
Yeah.
When they won,
I know who you're talking about, but yeah, it's the same. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, and the other one right there would be I can't think of his name right there. I can think of modern keepers, but I can't think of the past keepers. By watching early results, I think in modern keepers right there, I think that you're probably got to go to Neuer right now. It's probably one of the top keepers probably in the world. If you want to look at the history books right there of known keepers, definitely would be him. I thought that in his prime, I thought that David Seaman was a decent keeper. I think that I can't put him in my top. I think that Ali right there is probably, though he's underutilized with Brazil, is probably one of the top keepers through there.
I think for me, Seaman loses out because he got lobbed by Neymar from the halfway line.
Yeah.
That always ends that conversation for me. But Alan gives a good answer there. The best Rene Higuita. I don't know whether he was the best American keeper, South American keeper. He was definitely the most entertaining by far. For me, and I'm biased in this because I grew up with him, but Bruce Grobbelaar, I think, if he had played for any other nation than Zimbabwe, would have been hailed as one of the best keepers because he would have been at World Cups more. Well, I think at all rather than more often, and the world would have seen him. I think he was like this. People talk about the start of modern keeping being like, the 80s, 90s, 2000s maybe, but he was the start of modern keeping. He was like acrobatic, he was aerobatic, and he could play. He was I believe he was an outfield player for a while.
Yeah, the wobble legs.
The wobble legs as well. Like he was innovative. He was a creative goalkeeping thinker. Didn't always get it right, but he got it right more often than not. And he showed for me the value of goalkeepers taking risks certainly in an era where they stood on their line and failed to move an awful lot of the time. The second one for me, though, I want to say Gordon Banks because I saw a lot of footage of him, and he was number one, a great keeper, and that save that they always show from Pele from the header in the 1970 World Cup is a phenomenal save that I think any goalkeeper of any year would have been proud of. But he maintained this. This sounds like almost an ableist thing, but he maintained his standards despite being in a car crash and losing one eye. He was literally a one-eyed goalkeeper with no depth perception, and you couldn't tell. That's how good he was. And playing with your feet in those days wasn't required like it is today. But I don't think he was unable with his feet. He did probably as well as any goalkeeper then. But in terms of pure goalkeeping, Gordon Banks and Bruce Grobbelaar for me are the two. Alan says Banks was the best ever. Lev Yashin was a good one. And I like the idea of Lev Yashin simply because there was a footage or a picture of him stretching where he literally just bent backwards and touched his heels with his hands. And that was his pre-game stretch. And Alan also mentions Pat Jennings from the island of Ireland. He was a phenomenal goalkeeper. But again, another one where had he played for England or for Germany and had been at World Cups regularly, people would have probably praised him more. But back in that day, he played in one World Cup, I believe, and didn't really play for clubs that made finals in Europe. So nobody got to see how good he was.
So I had to look it up. It was Fernando Murciera right there, who was for the Uruguayan goalkeeper.
Yeah,
I mean, he was pretty amazing to watch. If you could catch
especially in those days, as has been mentioned, with the hard leather footballs and like that just got so heavy when they got wet.
Yeah,
and the pitch is good. It was like a modern goalkeeping session with different obstacles on the field, and you roll the ball and it goes in any direction. And I'm going to sound like an oldie, like an old-timer boomery type now, but that was when I still believe goalkeepers should be goalkeepers before they're anything else. I'm not too fond of the goalkeeper has to be the 11th outfield player.
Sweeper keeper stuff, yeah.
I like the sweeper keeper stuff, but I'd rather a goalkeeper who can save shots and be terrible at his feet than a goalkeeper who can split a defense with his own pass but can't save anything.
Yeah.
It's no use to us. It's Pepe Reina without the saves.
Yes.
Or Alisson without the saves. It's great to have the footwork stuff with your job. That's where you get the gloves. That's where you get the special rules to stop the ball going into the back of the net. And that's the way I think. Well, that's a nice thing that Alan brings up. Alan played a goal as a young teen, thanks to Jennings and Peter Bonetti, who was also an excellent keeper, but not for me ever in the pantheon of greats. So let's get back to Liverpool talk then. And before we get into our final choices of who should have been signed by Liverpool, the next bit is who we wish hadn't been signed by Liverpool. My choice is Mario Balotelli. I cannot stand the man. Unless he's playing for somebody else's club. Because then it's just entertainment. He was the most wasteful player we've ever had. Somebody like El Hadj Diouf or Charles Atanji were just nasty people. But Balotelli was like a team breaker. And I read a couple of weeks ago in an interview with somebody from the Brendan Rodgers team, it might have been Joe Allen or Adam Lallana, one of those, who said that basically if he wasn't feeding in training, he'd just start scoring own goals in the training games just to annoy everybody. And that's the kind of player that Rodgers needed to get, like, whatever that whole 3 envelopes and steady thing with Raheem Sterling happened. But Balotelli's the player you should have done that stuff with, for real, instead of like having like a cheap little gimmick. And also, I think the signing of Balotelli cut Rodgers' balls off after he had said, "We are not signing Balotelli. I don't want to work with him," and then had to work with him. I think that was the end of Brendan Rodgers right there, more than anything else. Because who's going to listen to him on the team? Who's going to listen to any discipline he wants to dish out when he changes his mind so easily? If he had any intestinal fortitude, he would have walked from the Liverpool job the second they signed Mario Balotelli against his wishes. We can complain about Brendan Rodgers' transfer ideas and how bad he is at them. But if you say you don't want a player and then you sign him the week later, you're gone. You're toast from then on, because who's going to respect you? But for Mario Balotelli himself, we didn't have the money to be wasting on players that didn't care. And I would rather take 10 Shaqiris, who was a good player but not the best player, but gave you everything he had on the pitch. I would take 15 Divock Origis and have them as my only team, then have a single Mario Balotelli even on the bench. What say you, Brian?
You already mentioned his name, El Hadji Diouf. The guy was probably one of the biggest poisons for every club that he'd ever touched right there. I mean, he's part of that whole little great players from World Cup of '98 that we watched right there. You know, he came through, and I can't Salafia came through at the same exact time, that same transfer window with him. I think also that was when we had Anthony Latalik and his brother came along at the same, and his cousin came along at the same time. I think that same window. But as far as was Diop came through there, he was automatically came through and against the grain work of everything the club stood for. I mean, between the spitting incidents right there, spitting on the blatant red cards that he got through the club. Then he came through and got transferred to Blackburn. I think it was his next journey he made. He basically came through and caused the same exact problems at Blackburn. Then with the Celtic, it caused even worse problems right there, to the point where Celtic just canceled his contract and said, "Hey, guess what? You're out of here, dude. We can't handle him." I think a football player like him, and he still at this point right there holds a grudge against Liverpool right there. I mean, if you can listen to him talk on there, he was a lot behind right there of Sadio wanting Sadio to leave the club. He thought that Sadio that Liverpool did deserve to have Sadio. He still fights Jamie Carragher on Twitter. If you look at it right there, they're still going back and forth with stuff. I mean, he basically chastised Gerrard so that he was singled out. I mean, so many different problems right there you have with a football player, not a team player, not a part of the organization. And it wasn't just Liverpool; it was every other club that he touched afterwards right there. So yeah, he's definitely on top of my list.
I mean, he just seems like your textbook narcissist, really, doesn't he? He some sort of talent. He didn't have no talent. He was a very able player. Let's say, just for comparison's sake, because he mentioned him, Sadio Mane had an arrogance about him, but Sadio Mane played for the team and respected Liverpool for his entire time. I mean, he may not have got on well with Salah, but we talked about Teddy Sheringham and Andy Cole earlier on, and they hated each other with a passion, but they worked well together for Man United because they were professionals. They understood what their job was. They didn't have to be friends. They just had to win and get their match-winning bonuses and whatnot for everybody. And Sadio Mane may not have got on well on a personal level with Salah, but you never knew, other than maybe occasionally not passing the ball to him. But we rationalise that as that being great strikers wanting to be the goal scorers.
Or competition.
It's a competition. But he never disrespected the club, and he never disrespected his teammates, and he never disrespected the manager. Whereas El Hadji Diouf did it from day one, almost, like from the first game. And I mean, I would still stick with my choice of Mario Balotelli because he was a genuine talent, and it wasn't that he was nasty. He just didn't care, and that to me is almost a bigger crime. But El Hadj Diouf really was a nasty piece of work, wasn't he? He was like your textbook Patrick Bateman in soccer player form.
Yes. And, and I'm going to say right there that, I do have a runner up right there who was not a bad character, but it was probably one of the worst business that we did. And that would be Andy Carroll. I think Andy Carroll was probably was some of the most horrendous business that we ever did in a club. I mean, we went over the odds to play for a player who did absolutely zero for this club.
I mean, I agree, but I think in Andy Carroll's defense, he was never openly disrespectful.
He didn't want to go.
He just didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
He would rather be back at home in Newcastle drinking Nuki brown ale with his mates. But I would put that one solely down to Damien Comolli and not knowing what the hell he was doing, as he displayed at pretty much every club he's ever been at. But when Andy Carroll did want to do it, he looked like he was the future of Liverpool goals, him and Suarez together. And that's another one. You could say Suarez is a nasty character. You could make a case for that. He bites, he spits. I'm still not on board with the whole he was intentionally racist on Everett. But I could see where that argument could be made. But when he put on the Liverpool jersey, he did everything he could to make sure Liverpool won. Maybe he did it because he wanted Suarez to win, but we didn't care because he scores 3 goals, we get 3 points. And we would accept the biting and the fouling and the petulance and the temperament for that, as every fan would with their own players. But El Hadj Diouf was just a nasty piece of work, and Mario Balotelli was just lazy. So if we could get rid of both of them, I would actually happily accept Andy Carroll then in our history, just to not have those two stands on our transfer books. I'll have an honourable mention for Paul Ince, because a dishonourable mention actually, because he was almost the Mario Balotelli of his day, in the sense that he thought he was bigger than Liverpool because he had come from Manchester United and Inter Milan. And I just love the story of Gerard Houllier showing him up one day in training and telling in front of everybody he had won 0 5-a-side games in training and then limped off the pitch in an FA Cup game against Liverpool's fiercest rivals, and then told him he was no longer needed at the club. And then Gerard Houllier said, he walked out and said, "You're going to take this club down." And Gerard Houllier later said in an interview, "Well, I did take them down. I took them down to Cardiff twice." I love that story.
But Paul Ince never worked out. I mean, it seemed like it was a transfer that it didn't seem like it worked. I mean, it was very early in the United States, in the U.S. to watch the Liverpool matches. Then, I mean, a lot of the stuff like that was Santana that we had to watch it on, and so you got to see limited matches with that. But it's just by looking at Paul, it just doesn't seem like he was a player that fit the side. He was like a signing that was just there, kind of like, And
I think that was a signing that was supposed to indicate that Liverpool were still playing with the big boys in the transfer market.
Yeah,
but he was washed up at that point.
Yep.
He was no Gary McAllister. That's how you get an old washed up player signing right. Yeah, that's how you do it.
Yeah,
and more power to Gerard Houllier for pushing that one through. And as Alan said, the so-called governor, was never going to work at Anfield because that arrogance suits Manchester United. That's always been what that club has been, in good times and bad. But Liverpool has always been about the team. That's Shankly's first philosophy point almost. It's about the team. You're playing for Liverpool Football Club, not for yourself, and that's how it's supposed to be. So let's get to our last choices for players that we should have signed. And mine may be a bit controversial, or you may think I've eaten too many donuts in the past week. It's from the Brendan Rodgers era, and I'm only picking him because he was available and we could have afforded him. But I think Brendan Rodgers would have been better served buying David Luiz for the defence rather than Dejan Lovren. Or Mamadou Sakho, for that matter. I think that David Luiz suits Brendan Rodgers because A, can't defend, but he was really good with the ball, and he was really good at free kicks. And we knew deep in our heart of hearts we weren't ever going to be a defensive behemoth against anybody. But if we had 11 players that could score from any option and any direction, we were in good form under Brendan Rodgers. And I think as much as Sacco, he had the reputation, and Dejan Lovren was good at Southampton. Was it Southampton we got him from?
Lovren, yes, it was Southampton.
Yeah. I mean, he was good there, and being good at a smaller club doesn't always translate to being good at a bigger club. But David Luiz had done it with the bigger club, and I think it would have been a better choice for us than those two in the long run. What do you say, Brian?
I'm going to go with one that's pretty new. I think Jude Bellingham. I think that we had the groundwork to do Jude Bellingham. I know he would eventually probably left to go to Real Madrid and sometime near the future, but I think we could have grew Jude Bellingham to a better player. Bruno Fernandes, what Alan has said, that was the transfer that almost happened too, like a couple years ago. I mean, so I think that Jude Bellingham is going to eventually probably become one of the better players. I think that Southgate has basically destroyed his Ballon d'Or chances right there from this Euros right there, because he drove him into the ground with a bad formation. But I think the future of Real Madrid with Bellingham coming there and actually driving that force, this is going to be so amazing. He's a generational talent, and I think that we had the opportunity to go and buy him, and I think that we could have, but we pulled out.
Why do you think we decided against it?
I don't know. I don't know what the finances were. I didn't know. I think the club was in two different places. I really don't know what happened in that situation. I know that that it was. I don't know whether that was something that they thought that we needed, even though we really needed it. I mean, so I don't know. It's hard to say right there. I mean, we're in a different era. I think that we talked about in that Klopp era, that Klopp drove the transfers. Maybe it wasn't something that Klopp wanted to have. I mean, I don't know, but I think that we were in the driving seat for a while. I mean, to get him. I mean, I think that it all fell apart, and I think eventually that Real came with a pretty cut price right there and got him.
Do you? It seems to me that Bellingham would have been a tailor-made Klopp player.
Mm-hmm.
So if I put some tinfoil around my head, do you think that was a battle that was had in the boardroom where the club said, we're not going to do this because we have a feeling you're not going to be here? Or I think we don't have the money, and that's possibly maybe even part of why Klopp decided he didn't have the energy to battle anymore, because he wasn't going to be given the resources he needed to rebuild that team.
But you think during this time right there, the amount of money that we kind of like happened with Arsenal, where we actually have put a lot of money in our infrastructure, a lot of money in the stadia, a lot of money right there for future growth at that same point of period, we might not have had the money to do it. I do think that it would have been an Edwards signing. I think that would have been an Edwards signing, because I think that he could have turned a profit later on down the line for it. And I think that would have been something, because that's what he does. I mean, he signs players he could have probably bought him for, was it 65? I think that, or something around that, what they bought Bellingham from Dortmund. He could have probably turned that into like it doubled or tripled that profit off of that. I mean, so I think it was. I think that it definitely would have been something that would have been done with the current financial backing board that we have now. I also think that what we had with with our past financial chief right there, you had a guy that really wasn't looking. We were questioning so many things last summer about what's this transfer? Why are we buying this? Why are we buying this player and stuff like that? When we need this, and we never got that. We got a lot of square pegs and round holes. Except for I think our midfield turned out better. I mean, in there, but I do think that Bellingham would have been a better option.
I just want to point out that I've had 2 compliments from Alan tonight, and I have no idea what points they are, so I can't even repeat them. Let me ask you this final question then for both of us. Of all the managerial changes we've had since the 90s, since Kenny Dalglish first, since he resigned in 1990, is there a manager that was connected to us that we didn't get that we should have got? That has gone on to show that they were actually a good option. We just didn't, for whatever reason, go for it. Like, bearing in mind, like there was a time when Houllier was sacked by Liverpool before Benitez was named. The speculation was like Alan Corbishley and Martin O'Neill, for example. Had we not got Benitez, Martin O'Neill for me probably would have been a decent choice because he was an excellent coach in those days. So is there anybody like that, maybe after Roy Hodgson, not Kenny Dalglish, or maybe after Kenny, not Brendan, that has gone on to do something? Not Klopp, obviously, because we got Klopp in the end, but somebody that we didn't get that you go, you know what, things might have been different with that guy.
Ericsson. I think the Ericsson would have. I think Ericsson
Houllier?
after Houllier, I think he'd have been a revolution right there for us. I think that he, when you come across
even more than Rafa.
I think that, okay, so here's the thing with Rafa right there. Okay, yeah, he changed our entire philosophy of how we played right there from Houllier. I mean, we changed it. We went to a more of a Spanish style tiki taka right there with how we played. I think that it was the right place for Xabi Alonso and for how Luis Suarez. I mean, it revolutionized how we played at the club versus the 4-4-2 stringent way that Houllier played. We actually were more stretched, more balanced right there with him. I think that Ericsson right there had a different philosophy right there, and I think that he was given a bum job right there with England. I think that he was probably going to go down as probably one of the greater England managers that didn't get a chance. I mean, in my opinion, I think that they saw that it was. The English media is a demon. We all know that right there about what they do to managers. I mean, Southgate is going to get it too here very shortly. Once he comes there, can't get past the quarterfinals of this right there. I mean, it's a wrap for him too. I mean, but I think that Ericsson would have been a great manager for us. I think that he would have came through. I mean, Brian Clough. I don't think Brian Clough's philosophy would have fit our club. I just don't think that he's that. I just don't think that he would have been that. That would be after what? I mean, when he came in. That would be like 81, 82 right there after Forrest came there, won, and then he.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been 82 because then it would have been Joe Fagan after Bob Paisley.
Yeah.
And Joe Fagan won a treble. I outside of the stuff he said about Hillsbury, if we just take Brian Clough as just a manager, I think he was a phenomenal manager. But he was only a phenomenal manager if you didn't have any money to spend.
But then
even though he spent the first £1 million on a player, he had to earn that through success and ticket sales and player sales and stuff. But he wouldn't have suited Liverpool because Liverpool were a dominant team, and he proved that at Leeds. He couldn't handle teams that were already winners. But he could take Derby to a league title and then take Forest to 2 European Cups.
And I'm gonna say controversially right there. I think that Jose Mourinho would have been probably when he first came here would have actually probably been a very very astute manager for us. I think
I would say, and not to I love Benitez, and I don't even love him just for 2005 for Istanbul. I just think he was a good manager and a good man. Mm-hmm. We would have won the league under Jose Benitez.
Yes.
Because he knew how to win the league.
Yeah. I mean, he came there and slowed the game down to a trickle. And he came there after they scored. I mean, if you watch the way those early Chelsea, when he took over Chelsea, of how he came there and played, it was a grueling match with him. You came there, once he was able to go there, get above you. It stopped. I mean, they shut everything down. I mean, that's why you can say right there. I mean, that's why Frank Lampard is considered the player that he is right there because of Jose Mourinho, what he came there and created. John Terry, the same thing. He's considered that by what Jose Mourinho did to him.
I think as well, though, kind of on that note, that if you look at post Benitez player biographies and autobiographies and interviews, like for example, Craig Bellamy being told after a Champions League final that he's no longer needed at the club on the plane back from the game, which I think that was the 2007 final, wasn't it? Yeah, he was with us.
Yep.
After you just lost the final, we don't need you anymore. You can start for a new club. You're devastated at that point. Whereas everybody who played for Chelsea says, with the exception of Crespo and all those who he turfed out. Everybody says Jose Mourinho was the best man manager they've ever had because his tactics, as you said, his tactics were very restrictive. There was nothing hugely special about them. It was just very hard to figure them out and combat them. But his players loved them because he told them you're going to win, and then they won. And you're the best player in your position, and they played like the best player in their position. Whereas Benitez, as much as I love him, would tell players you're not doing this right. And who wants to hear that kind of constant criticism all the time when you're trying to win things? So I think Mourinho would have won the league with us because of what you said.
And I think that the same thing when you read about Benitez was not a manager. He was a very, very standoffish and very cold and very to the point right there. He was a total opposite of what Houllier was. Houllier was a manager if there ever was one right there. I mean, we would not have seen. That's why do you think Gerard wanted to leave right there during that part right there? He didn't feel wanted. He didn't feel like after he just came back and won one of the greatest championships in history right there,
and one of the best FA comebacks as well.
But he didn't feel any love. He didn't feel like that, like he was needed or he was required. So that's kind of a hard pill to take. And then even when Benitez went to Everton, he came there even though what the squad he had. Same problems. Even when he went to Newcastle, same problems. It's the same thing consistently right there. You can go, yes, the philosophy is there, but sometimes you have to go there and grace it with a little bit of hey, you're doing a good job every once in a while. To actually go there and make an effort. And I think Jose came there and loved his players. And I think that's a big difference right there you had. Yeah, he came there. People got annoyed by his press conferences and the things he said and stuff like that. But overall right there, he loved his players, and he wanted his players to succeed right there, and that's a big difference right there. It's the same thing, that I actually think that birthed a lot of modern managers in the same boat. With that is that the ethos part of being a manager of doing it and of raising a player. And I don't know where Brendan Rodgers didn't get it, even though he actually managed under him, how he didn't actually gain that type of feeling right there toward him.
I think that's correct. I think that's. I will argue with anybody to my last right's deathbed that Brendan Rodgers is probably one of the better field coaches, training ground coaches in Europe. But you don't play games with players; they're not 5-year-olds. Like if you love a player, you tell the player you love them. If you don't, then you say it's not working. Move on, and I wish you the best, and I'll help you any way I can. Which is. Everybody who has a job knows that's what good managers do. They'll be straight with you when you've done something wrong. And then if you're trying your best, but you're still making the odd mistake, they'll say, keep trying. Good job. Yeah. And I hate to give the guy credit because you have to give him credit. But Alex Ferguson said, the 2 best words that you'll ever say to anybody in management is good job.
Yeah.
And it's such a simple thing.
And my opinion of Jose Mourinho changed when I actually saw a documentary with him right there. That was on there. That was I think on Amazon Prime.
The Spurs one.
Yeah, when I saw him and he was there talking through there, and I was like, wow. And you can see like that and reading stuff like that, he devoted a lot of the weight of his philosophy right there to Bobby Robson. Right there, who he came through, who he learned a lot of this from.
Who's generally named one of the best managers to ever coach in Europe.
Yeah. You learn from that right there. It's like life is just a whole constant stream of lessons of learning how to be a better person, how to be a better manager, how to go out there and have a better team and all. And so. I think that Jose's had a lot of knocks right there, but I think a lot of knocks that are some of his fault, but there's some things out there that are under different restraints and how the attention that he brought to himself. Versus by shielding himself, put himself out there and shielding his players. And I think that's a good manager. That's to my opinion right there.
I think that's a good note as any to end. Tonight. What's going to happen though is now, as well as being named as the Nunez haters of the American Scouts or TV, we're now going
we're the Mourinho lovers.
The Mourinho lovers and the Benitez haters. They don't be further from the truth. So it just remains to say thank you very much, Brian, for tonight. Not thank you to the internet gods for depriving us of Trevor, but hopefully he'll be back next week, and we will too, and hopefully at the correct time, if I don't have to suddenly work all of a sudden. and stay late. But what we have decided, myself and Brian, so make sure you're tuning in for it, to have a very different type of show next week, which may not be soccer related. But if you like your music, next week, we'll on this channel at 8 p.m. Eastern time. I think that's 5 p.m. for Sir Z. This will be the place to be. We will be the cool kids talking about good music stuff. So make sure you're at that. Make sure you're liking and subscribing on our YouTube, our Facebook, our Instagram, and our Twitter, and our Patreon, where the good extras are. Comment, share, let your friends know about us, and then join in our Discord channel and all the crazy chats we have there. There's no plans, Alan. Really sorry. Trevor had to have an argument with the internet gods, so the plans are put away for the week.
They're so ruthless.
Yeah, but you did get 2 cabbages there tonight talking to you though. So but make sure you like this. I believe morning coffee is tomorrow. It's not tomorrow, so don't wake up early to watch the morning coffee tomorrow.
So no more coffee.
Have a break for tomorrow. But Monday podcast should be on, and I think there should be European games to talk about at that point, and maybe
Actually, I think there is morning coffee tomorrow. There's no morning coffee on the 1st and the 5th. I think those 2 days.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So next Monday, so Monday and Friday, no morning coffee.
Yeah, and probably good just as well for the Friday one, because everybody will be all hot dogs, beard, and fireworked out from Independence Day. So having said that, we should be on next week, right?
Absolutely.
I just realized it's July 4th. I mean, it's just Thursday for me.
It's just Thursday for me. I mean, so I'm good. I'm good. So
it's my sister's birthday. That's the only thing, because I'm Irish. So why would I celebrate American Independence Day? Well, it's because there's great potato salad. That's why. But we will see everybody next week. Have a good one. Thank you to Brian. Thank you to Alan for his comments, and make sure you're joining in everything we do so you get all the good stuff. And then for Thursday night at 9:57 p.m. Eastern, I think it's time to get down, boogie, and have some 70s porn music. Peace out.